Hi everyone, thank you for making it to this session, laying the AI foundations, data and compute for Africa. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this session, to this discussion this afternoon. My name is Daniele Tricarico. I'm the head of the EmergingTech program at the GSMA, Mobile for Development. And our mission as a program is to accelerate impact and climate action by fostering the adoption of AI and other emerging technologies, from computer vision to IoT to drones to blockchain in low and middle income countries. And a big part of our work is in this region in Africa. How do we do this? We work with our members, with mobile operators. We work with startups, with governments, with NGOs. And really what we do is we essentially support them to develop scalable, commercially sustainable, impactful digital innovations that are also built on inclusive and responsible AI principles. This is very core to the work that we do, responsible AI. AI must be responsible. So, AI is obviously a key theme for this session, obviously. It was mentioned very, very often yesterday, as well in the keynotes, as one of the key transformational technology, really, in the region. You've heard some data about the opportunity. The economic opportunity is very significant. So AI could contribute $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. If you look at Africa, if Africa takes 10% of this opportunity, which is very reasonable, that will mean $1.6 trillion by 2030. And also interesting data is about the opportunity for employment. In Africa, AI is certainly seen as a great opportunity to drive economies and drive employment. So AI could generate 230 million digital jobs by 2030. So that's also very, very important. This is data from SAP. So these figures fundamentally show that AI isn't just a technological shift, but it's really an economic and social transformation opportunity. So besides the hype, besides the opportunity, we're also seeing real momentum, and it's really exciting. Looking at AI from the perspective of the mobile industry, mobile operators, they have been using AI for several years. They're increasingly using AI here in Africa, as well as the continent is also adopting 5G. AI for the industry is fundamentally a driver for business efficiencies, right? So think about using AI for network optimization, fraud prevention in Africa, in the case of mobile money, right? It's very, very important, but also for customer support, better customer service. And we're seeing a plethora now of mobile operators using AI to really improve the customer service and even deliver customer service in local languages in Africa. But increasingly, mobile operators are also providing value at the last mile. So 3 opportunities come to mind. One is about the opportunity to develop local language models, right? We are seeing this is an opportunity that is really gaining traction. Just yesterday, here at this event, we had an announcement about a coalition, a collaboration of mobile operators in this region and other actors it's a cross-sector initiative to support underrepresented languages. So this is very exciting to see. A second key area of work for mobile operators is around data centers, is around enabling the ecosystem, building compute capabilities as well. In a way, in Africa, mobile operators play a bit of a big tech role in a sense, perhaps more than they do in other parts of the world. So it's really nice to see this role besides providing connectivity and core services. And then the third opportunity, really, the third areas where we see mobile operators increasing being active is around actually supporting services, enabling innovations with startups in particular at the last mile, leveraging their core capabilities and their AI capabilities as well. Talking about the startup ecosystem, it's also driving great transformation, great innovations, which is exciting to see. More and more startups are now adopting and shifting to AI across Africa, including for impact-driven initiatives. 3 key sectors come to mind. And these have also been mentioned a few times, actually, in talks at this event. One is agriculture. This morning we had a session by our AgriTech team, and they talked about the way the AgriTech sector is expanding in the region. Predictive generative AI is increasingly being used in the region, for example, to provide precision farming, precision advisory to farmers at the farm level. Healthcare is another great area of innovation. HealthTechs in the region increasing using AI for diagnosis, remote care. Think also about telehealth. It's really happening and it's exciting to see. And I would also point to another sector, which is education. EdTech is really an area where AI can be incredibly disruptive, providing personalized, generative AI in particular, right? Providing personalized educational content to students and teachers across the continent. So together, these examples, I think they show that Africa is not just a user of AI, it's not just adopting AI, it's also creating innovations, which is great. But there are challenges, and this is really the framing of this session, is around let's think about the challenges, the foundations, the infrastructure that is supporting this innovation. This is why we want to talk about the foundation, about data and compute for Africa. In our first talk with our CEO of MTN Rwanda, who's joining us today, he will highlight some of these challenges, particularly related to availability of data and compute. So these are significant, and we need to find ways to address the scarcity of data in local languages and also the scarcity of compute. And there are some innovations that are really starting from Africa to address African challenges. A couple of examples. If you look at compute, think about a company like Cassava Technologies. They've been quite prominent in the discourse around AI. Recently, they're now deploying GPUs. They're planning to deploy GPUs in Africa and for Africa in partnership with NVIDIA. So that's really interesting how compute solutions are now being developed locally. When it comes to data, we have networks such as Masakane, which are creating open, community-driven data sets in natural language, in local languages, supporting natural language processing, NLP for African languages. And actually, in our panel today, we have Lelapa, who is participating in this great network of innovators addressing the data challenge in the region. So, with this in mind, today's sessions is about bringing together key players, shaping this ecosystem, and addressing the foundations, particularly around data and compute. We'll begin, as I mentioned, with MTN Rwanda. We have here the CEO of the company will share their vision and current work in advancing Rwanda's AI journey. And then we'll move into a panel discussion featuring Amini, Lelapa, two very innovative startups, as well as IBM Africa. And we will explore how can they collectively strengthen the AI foundations in the region. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming to the stage Monzer Ali, who is the CEO of MTN Rwanda. Monzer, over to you.
Is it working? Good afternoon, everyone. Muraho. When we talk about AI in Africa, two things come to mind: possibility and urgency. Possibility, as Daniele mentioned, AI is transforming the way that we live, we learn, we grow, we play. Urgency, because Africa, with Africa representing 18% of the total population, but with less than 1% of the global data center capacity, and with less than 0.1% of online content in the local African languages. Let this sink for a few seconds. 18% of the population with less than 1% of the compute capacity and less than 0.1% of online contents in African languages. Those are not statistics. Those are not just the numbers. Those are call to action. Otherwise, the AI is going to increase the digital divide. It's not going to bridge the digital divides. So as an organization, as an MTN, how we are trying to address this problem as a pan-African mobile operation present in 16 African countries with more than 300 million customers and a gigawatt of a data center capacity. We are approaching the AI over 3 dimensions, or a 3 pillar. The first pillar is AI for telco. The second pillar is telco for AI. The third pillar, the responsible AI. I will unpack each one of them briefly. On the first one, or the first dimension, which is the AI for telco, which Daniel spoke about, as a telco operation, like any other business, we are embedding the AI in the day-to-day operation to optimize the network, optimize the customer experience, reduce cost, also enhance the decision-making for our day-to-day business. The second dimension is the telco for AI. We are laying down the foundation for the digital AI to thrive in Africa. We are increasing the compute capacity. And we are also deploying the next generation connectivity. We launched 5G early this year or May this year, covering key sector, key location in Kigali. And as you know, 5G is not just a network, it's a capability, it's a foundation for the AI to thrive. And also, we are bringing the edge compute and the intelligence closer to the consumer, to the community, and to the business. The third dimension, as I mentioned, is the responsible AI. And that's very, very, very important. As a company, as an African company for Africa, we are committed to an ethical design, fairness, transparency, and AI that can serve everyone. And also an AI that can represent the value of our company and the value as an African continent. I'm sure you passed through our exhibition and you saw Miss Baza. Miss Baza is a clear example of what we are planning to do as MTN. Miss Baza is an AI assistant powered by a machine learning that can speak English, French, Kenya, Rwanda, and Kiswahili. It's very important. And Miss Baza will bring the AI to everyone. For the people with a smartphone with internet, for the citizen with a smartphone without internet, for the citizen that they don't have a smartphone, they have the old mechanical keyboard phone. That's what we call AI for everyone. We don't want to leave anyone behind. We are working closely with the Ministry of ICT and Innovation, RURA, with an aim to drive AI adoption for everyone. Across Africa, the discussion is moving from potential or from opportunity to implementation. And innovation is everywhere in Africa. I mean, we all know about mobile money. Africa now became the Silicon Valley of mobile money. But the challenge with AI will remain with the limited data compute capacity, fragmented data set, and also limited local content in African languages. As an MTN and as a key player in this industry, every server we build, every data set we localize, every AI model we train will bring us closer to an Africa that's on its digital destiny. As we say in Kenya, Rwanda, Nicho Jihe, the time is now. The moment is now. Let us build an AI for Africa, by African, in African languages. Morakoze Chani. Thank you.
Thank you, Monzer. Please come back to the stage for a couple of questions with me. Thank you so much for this overview. If you want to take a seat. Sure. There you go.
I'll sit here.
I say this central here. So it was a really interesting overview around the work that you're doing here in Rwanda. Rwanda is a really interesting country when you look at it from the outside, obviously, because already a few years ago, there was this national strategy framework, the first in Africa, one of the first in Africa, really, to sort of provide the foundation and the vision for AI in the country. I want to ask you, some argue that AI adoption by telcos can be really a driver for transformation, particularly in Africa. When it comes to AI adoption, it's really critical to have actually the MNOs, when they play that bigger role, as I mentioned before, of big techs also, facilitating the ecosystem. When they adopt it, then the country benefits. You mentioned some opportunities that you're working on, and I wanted to ask you, can you give us a bit of a flavor of where you are in terms of like where you see the most prominent opportunity, perhaps, and how you're supporting the ecosystem?
No, thank you so much. Absolutely. Rwanda has a clear mission and a clear vision. Vision 2050 to move toward a knowledge-based economy. And we are, as a player in the ecosystem, as MTN, we have to play our parts. And we have to play a big role in supporting the national digital transformation agenda. As I mentioned, we are optimizing the connectivities by rolling out the next generation network, which is 5G. Mm-hmm. And as I said, 5G is not just a network, and it's not just high speed. 5G is a capability where tech startup, innovator can come and develop a vertical application kind of AI that require real-time decisioning and real-time interaction. I do believe we play a big role. We need to lay down the foundation, additional computes, additional data center capacity, edge computing to bring the intelligence very close to the communities, to the business. And we are working very closely, as I mentioned, with the industry player, with the ministry, with RURA, with partners, to make sure that we are supporting and driving forward the national digital transformation.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, what you mentioned about edge computing is really interesting. It's an area that we are looking at very closely at GSMA. Fundamentally, not every workload needs to run on the cloud, right? And there is an opportunity really to run models at the edge more effectively. So it's an example of that frugal innovation that can really help. And MNOs certainly have a big role to play, as well as other innovators who are supporting that. I wanted to ask you as well about, well, you mentioned two keywords, responsible AI and inclusive AI. So responsible AI is something that for us at the GSMA, I mean, we've been working on that for many years with mobile operators, really to try to bring them together at a global level to ensure that there is coordinated efforts, that the industry adopts AI in a responsible way. MTN has also been part of this, has been driving with other operators these conversations and this coalition, really. Maybe you can tell us your perspective. What does it mean for you in practice, to adopt responsible AI? What is it for you?
Yeah. I mean, AI per design should be inclusive. And it's very, very important because it's AI, if we don't develop and design AI that's responsible, we are risking to leave Africa behind. And we are risking to increase the digital divides. We need to have a proper framework when it comes to AI deployments, AI design. Every single AI model should be transparent, should be fair, and should support the local languages and the local contents. That's very and extremely important. Even before we start building, we need to have that framework that can tell us what do we need to do to make sure that AI is indeed for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in our work, absolutely, we emphasize this aspect of AI when we work with the industry. First thing that comes to mind with the responsible AI is data governance, right? Having solid data governance in place. But your point about inclusivity is absolutely fundamental. The data that we use must be inclusive and represent all the different communities and customers and users that you have as a mobile operator. And you mentioned inclusive AI. So responsible AI is also inclusive AI. But when we talk about AI, like any new technology, we're bringing new value. And when we bring this new value, there is also a risk of increasing the gap, right? I wanted to ask you a little bit your view on this, because at the GSMA, we talk about the usage gap, right? Getting people to use the mobile internet. But now we also have potentially another gap that is being created about the users of AI and the non-users. What are your thoughts about this?
See, AI remind me is when the internet started in 1990s, in the early of the 90s. And when internet started, we were all saying, oh, it's a bubble, it's gonna die, it's not gonna remain. And you can see now, internet is taking the world by storm. So AI is here to stay. First, let's agree. AI, for sure, it's becoming a buzzword, and there's a lot of hype around it. The bubble will burst, for sure, but AI will stay. I mean, like the internet bubble that has happened in the late 90s. AI is here to stay, and we need to embrace AI, and we need to embed AI in everything that we do in our day-to-day life. I mean, if I will go home at the evening, I see my son, 7-year-old, on ChatGPT. So AI is everywhere. It has invaded every single house. It has invaded every single school. So AI is a way of life. It has transformed the way that we live, we learn, we grow. We should not fear AI. We are not going to lose our job because there's AI. The people that are going to lose their job are the people who are fearing to use AI. AI is here to stay. I encourage everyone to use AI by any way or another. We as a telco provider, we are doing all what we can to lay down the foundation to make sure that we are bridging the gap and to make sure that the gap is not increasing because of the AI hype that is hitting our door, and it's everywhere right now.
Yeah. In a way, AI can also help to bridge the gap in terms of mobile internet adoption, right?
Absolutely.
For example, it can help with digital literacy, bringing mobile users on board and using mobile internet, or even using AI for credit scoring for handset affordability, right? Enabling access.
And AI will bring the affordability to the consumer. Because, you know, latest technology, when the technology advances, the cost of the old technology will go down. So AI should bring the cost of production, the internet cost of production down. And when the cost of production per megabyte reduces, you will be able to sell the megabyte at a very affordable price.
Yeah, that is very important. One final question for me. Collaboration, partnerships, telcos play an important enabling role, but you also work with others, right? You enable others, and it's about ecosystem collaboration. It can be government, it can be startups. I want to ask your view about how you see this opportunity to innovate with AI in partnership with others in Rwanda.
I think it's very important points. I mean, for the AI to succeed, we should not compete. We should unite. This is how I do believe. I do believe in collaboration when it comes to the latest technologies. It's a latest technology. It's a new technology. We need to join hand as an industry player, as a government, as an NGO, as a GSMA, to make this AI really works and serve people and add value to the people. Alone, we cannot do it alone. We'll do our parts, but we need from everyone to come on board and join hand with us to make the AI really works by adding value to the citizen and to the different organization.
Fantastic. Monzer, thank you so much for your presentation and for this perspective. A round of applause, please, for Monzer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So next, we have our panel. So I'd like to call to the stage my colleague Eugénie Humeau, who is going to moderate this panel. Building Africa's AI Foundation, data, compute, and to the last point, collaboration for growth. Please, Eugénie, join us on the panel. And also I'd like to call to the stage our speakers. We have Kallot, founder and CEO of Amini. We have Pelonomi Moiloa, co-founder and CEO of Lelapa AI, and Pelani Malange, who is working with IBM. He's the client engineering lead for IBM. Round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and yeah, thank you so much, Daniele and Monzer, for this great discussion and keynote. Really interesting to hear more about AI from a telco perspective, like MTN on AI transformation. So yeah, in the next conversation, we wanted to broaden and hear a bit about the perspective from different players in the ecosystem, and looking at the foundations of AI, so data and compute, and what we need to really build a thriving AI ecosystem for Africa. So yeah, really happy to be joined by Kate Kallot, the CEO and founder of Amini, Pelonomi Moiloa, the co-founder and CEO of Lelapa AI, and Pelani Malange, client engineering lead with IBM. So yeah, to get us started, I just wanted to hear a bit from you about your current work, mission, when it comes to AI development in Africa. So yeah, maybe starting with you, Kate, and then Pelonomi and Pelani.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me, Eugénie. It's a pleasure to be here today. So at Amini, we're building the sovereign data infrastructure for Africa and the Global South. It's not exactly where we started, but this is where we are today. Actually, we started a little bit more upper the stack, where we were thinking of building an AI company for Africa, but we got a big reality check 3 years ago where there is no data. So we realized that if we're facing that problem in the ecosystem, everybody else is. So why don't we go about building a data infrastructure that allows us to take any fragmented, analog, unstructured data, very scattered across the continent, and kind of like process and structure that data. But then once we had the beautiful data sets, we realized there's no compute. So how do we go about actually providing more compute and access to GPUs on the continent? We decided to start deploying micro data centers that are powered by renewable and that can contain micro nodes of GPUs to be able to sustain the data sets and the demand, and then provide value end-to-end to countries. So we've been doing this for 3 years now, and we've deployed not just in Africa, but also across the Global South, in Latin America and the Caribbean, and now also entering in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pelonomi. Like Kate, started an AI journey with a big dream. At Lelapa, a bunch of us got together and we were like, we're going to solve all the problems on the African continent with AI, from medicine to finance to agriculture to everything, robotics. And then we sat down and we realized that, much like you, we couldn't solve any of those problems before solving some fundamental problems before that. And the one that we identified was that of language. So we knew that in order for people to gain access to the digital economy, in order to access products and services, especially because in the African context, not everybody is located close to where those services are provided and thus can rely on mobile connectivity to access those types of things. They wouldn't be able to do so if those products and services weren't speaking to them in their own language. So for example, in South Africa, one of the telcos that we work with have mentioned that they're only able to process 5% of the calls that come through their call center for languages that are not English. You level that out with the fact that only 8% of people speak English at home in South Africa. You see that there's a really large gap in terms of information flow between this broad range of customers who are needing to communicate with their service providers. So that is the gap that we're looking to close. But more broadly speaking, we've kind of come across this little treasure that because we're developing from a place of resource scarcity, what we're really doing is building AI in a resource-constrained environment and quickly becoming the best in the world at developing language models for resource-constrained environments. And that's really exciting for us because it means that we don't just solve problems for the African continent and the complexity of languages that we have here, even with the compute and data problems, but we can do that for emerging markets. So we'll be coming to you for advice when we want to try go to other areas. But more broadly speaking, for the entire world, we know that these large AI companies with these large LLMs are really running into major resource constraints. As far as energy consumption in terms of their margins for every call that gets made on their models. So the approach here is our slogan, which is basically resource efficiency from Africa to the world. If we make it work here, it can work anywhere, and it's the only way that we can scale AI sustainably going forward.
Wonderful.
Hello, good afternoon. Slightly a harsher voice than the voices we heard before, so I apologize for that. But it's great work that my colleagues here have shared in terms of what they're trying to do in Africa. I must be honest with you. I'm coming from a company that's 114 years old. So just bear with me. I cannot summarize it in a minute. But what I can say is that, yes, we are focused on building infrastructure. And one of the things that we're doing with GSMA is basically trying to bring that infrastructure to the telcos and to the SMEs in Africa. I would deep dive on that when we start talking about more around how are we doing that. But all in all, I mean, the great work that GSMA is doing and exposing these particular platforms is what IBM stands for. We are a platform provider. You will not hear IBM where we're working with the end consumer. We work with enterprises. We work with businesses. How do we enable businesses to get to their market, to get to their customers? So I am the person in IBM who leads a team in Africa, and my team basically tries to see how you can adopt that technology, that emerging technology at edge, hybrid cloud, whatever it is, as quickly as possible and make it work. That's what my team does. I am Pelani Malange. Thank you.
Thanks so much, to the three of you for this this overview. So, I want to now move on to the foundation. So, data, compute, and maybe starting with data and starting with you, Kate. You mentioned it. Amini was funded to tackle the lack of structured and quality data. You talked a bit about the evolution of Amini as well, but it would be great to hear from you on the challenges and opportunities when actually building this kind of infrastructure.
Yeah,
data infrastructure.
Data infrastructure. So from our perspective, it's important to remember that Africa is still the most data scarce continent. And that data scarcity spans across multiple types of data. So you can think about language that you're tackling. You can think about even data about the environment. When we think about climate change and such, data in agriculture is still very hard to get our hands on. And that data scarcity is basically driving a lot of the, hampering the continent to develop and accelerate its development with AI, because you need the data, you need the computer, and you need the model. Without the data, you can't go anywhere. So when we started the company, the first big challenge was, okay, let's tackle that data scarcity. And we first thought that the data did not exist. But we actually realized that it's not that the data doesn't exist, it's just that it's a format right now that can't be analyzed. It's not AI ready. So sometimes it's sitting in like paper format in a minister's office, or you will have data in telcos that is not open. So people have data, but it's actually very scattered and distributed and fragmented and in every format possible, including paper and handwriting. So now how do you actually go about building something that can take a lot of that scattered data and kind of structure that data together to provide data sets that are calibrated, validated, and adapted to our context? And this is why we kind of decided to make that pivot, because, you know, it's one thing to think about, oh, I need more environmental data, so I'm going to launch more satellites for Africa. But actually, do you actually need those satellites? There's already a lot that exists. What we need is probably the data from the ground that's whether in farmers or in large corporations that are sitting there, and how do we go about aggregating all that data? So when we've been looking into that data scarcity, we also started with agriculture and environment, because, you know, natural capital is still pretty much the pulmon of our economies, agriculture, minerals, and energy. And we realized that really the ecosystem just needed a backbone that can really transform that data and kind of re-trigger data sets that are calibrated for the context. And we've started to kind of open source our data sets. We also started to open source some of the models that we've built. We trained some foundation models for earth science. So think about it as sort of GPT, but that's hyper-focused on what you see on the earth, so the environment, and that's hyper-localized and tailored to Africa. So we kind of released 3 of those open source, and the idea is really to encourage the ecosystem to continue contributing, but then at the same time providing them tools for them to kind of build localized application for their country, which global models today actually don't provide us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about data and the lack of data, I think one of the main gaps is around language. I think Monzer mentioned it in the keynote, less than 0.1% of online content is in African languages compared to over 50% for English. Pelonomi, I think in your introduction you said less than 10% of people in South Africa speak English, if I'm not mistaken. And also an issue is the lack of data that truly reflects people's realities. And so at Lelapa, at the core of Lelapa, I think is also this idea of human-centered AI. So my question for you is, what does that mean in practice, and how is Lelapa working to bridge that gap when we think about language data?
Yeah, I think they're kind of coupled together. And the thing that I always try to remind people is that the assumptions around how much data we require to build these models is fundamentally based off of a Western view of access, right? So when we talk about there's less than 1% or 0.1% of African languages on the internet, our question, the question we asked is really, what is the minimum amount of data that you need to actually train a model? Because sure, it's only 1%, but 1% of how much? Maybe it's 1% of a lot, and you only need a little bit to get a model to perform well. And I mean, when we ask this question, we now have transcription and translation models. Our transcription is 20% better than the next model on the market. Our translation is only like 3% better than the next model on the market. But we've used 60% less data to train those models. So when we talk about data scarcity, and I love, Kate, what you were talking about is collecting the right kind of data, what we've realized is that having the right data is way more important than having massive amounts of it, having really high quality data. And this is kind of where the human part comes in, because the high quality data is determined by a human. So how did we use 60% less data than these models that perform worse than us? We brought humans into the room, and we got them to talk in a way that reflects their livelihoods, in the way that they communicate with each other. In South Africa, which is quite familiar to other people in regions which are multicultural and multilingual, we speak multiple languages all at once. And those types of complexities, some of our languages have clicks, there's our intonations, there's some languages which are tonal, so a single word written the same can mean different if you pronounce it differently. These are the type of intricate complexities that current models from like a foundational layer aren't really able to capture, which is why you need so much data. So the first step is to make sure that the data you're collecting is really representative of the problem that you're trying to address, really specific, really good. Second is making sure that you're addressing those foundational layers that don't assume that it follows the structure of English. And then you get people to create that data that matches those two scenarios, and yeah, you get models that just perform way better with way less. And yeah, from the human-centered part of it, like we've built models for call centers, and we literally got call center agents to come together and like pretend that they were doing a call with each other. And they use the right vocabulary, they use the way that people speak to each other, the intonation and the way they communicate is mimicking the real life scenario. And yeah, through that we're just able to make it a lot more specific around what people actually do on the ground. Yeah, that's kind of how we've done it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like there is a growing number of initiatives around kind of crowdsourcing voice data specifically to have, to be able to reflect local dialects, different accents. In many cases, like code switching as well, so when people speak different languages and a mix of languages in the same sentence. Yeah, that's really interesting. Pelani, turning to you, talking about compute, obviously, data and compute are very interdependent. With IBM, you've been working on deploying compute infrastructure in different African countries. and I imagine you have to navigate different environments from regulatory frameworks, AI national strategies, but also varying levels of power and connectivity. So from your perspective with IBM, what approaches have you taken to deploy that infrastructure, and what are some models that have been maybe working well?
Thanks for that question, because I mean, IBM, we started off as a hardware company. But before I go to answer you, I'm just appreciative of the open source thing that you just mentioned there. Do the hard work so we can use it.
I have a counter to this.
Yeah, yeah, and the approach that they're doing to basically use smaller models to make domain specific, it clearly works better for us who are busy with the infrastructure. I'll tell you why. For example, earlier this year, IBM, and by the way, some of this technology for the companies that work with IBM is there in your data center, right? There are two technologies that we're working with. There's IBM Power, where basically most of the banks and most of the governments have bought IBM Power, but they never knew that they can switch on what we call a mathematical matrix accelerator that can actually work with any open source LLM, download it and use it. And I hope you open source is on Hugging Face, right?
It is.
Yes, because all you need to do is download that model, and you have got a machine already on-prem where you don't need to send the data outside. Number two is most of the banks are using right now IBM Z. The IBM Z, it's really a mothership of everything. It's really, you can think of cloud on-prem. Yeah? I know that there's been several point of views around moving away from the mainframe, but this mainframe, you can imagine that just a year and a half ago, we had the biggest sales of mainframe in IBM in the world. And simply because if you look at the analytics that's happening on-prem, it's very, very important that you need to do those analytics on-prem where the data is sitting because of latency issues, right? And what we have done this year is we launched another, there's a Telco processor which we produced. You can do LLM on-prem, and also if you need more stuff, we've got what we call the Spire card that is available, that you can actually put 8 of those and be able to be able to run a 70 billion parameter LLM on-prem without moving the data. But the efficiency again is on the energy. How much energy are these computing power these computers using? For the Z, it's like basically using the energy of a fridge. You know what I mean? So we are focusing on innovation where basically energy efficient, doing compute without need for GPUs. I'm not saying GPUs are not important. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that there is fit for purpose LLMs that you can actually use, and that's our approach for Africa. I think, to be honest with you, I've done not less than 34 experiments, plus other things that have been deployed this year alone. I think for Africa, we need to adopt with what we have. GPUs are coming, but may not necessarily be the solution for Africa. Yeah? So that's my view, and that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in many cases, it's about working with the resources that you have. And I guess a question for you, Pelonomi, and maybe Kate as well, but how does compute availability, or the lack of, shape your ability to train models and run local language models as well in resource-constrained environments? I imagine for startups as well, with less resources. How do you overcome that challenge as well?
I mean, it's really tricky. So we've been very lucky that we've been supported by all the big techs in providing us with compute credits. It's kind of like what are those cards that you get at a store with pre-money loaded on it? But what we found is that even having those credits, even if it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, there is another layer on top of that about whether you then have access to GPUs. And because of the supply and demand problem of there being limited GPUs in the world, we have to go through another application process. So already having the money to pay for it to then have access to GPUs. Some of this we've managed to get around, like when the US goes to sleep, then we can have access, but it doesn't always work. And that means that we have had to look at alternatives for training. And I know people may call you a crazy person when you're like, we don't need GPUs, we should be looking at other forms of compute, but I'm in your boat.
Thank you. Welcome aboard.
I get very concerned when people talk about infrastructure on the African continent and they're thinking about these huge data centers with large amounts of GPU compute. To me, it just sounds like extra resource strain on an already resource-strained continent when there are other options. So, for example, I mean, we've done the 60% more efficient from a data perspective, but our models, because we're dealing with smaller domain, what we call SLM, small language models, we're also dealing with like 70% less compute than is typically used to train these translation and transcription models. And we're not going to stop there. we're gonna go edge. We're going to come ask for advice from UK and on device, because at the end of the day, if we want technology to work for the African continent and the global south at large, those models need to be small enough to fit on a phone. Yeah. Sure, I mean, we're at a telco conference and they're sorting out the 5G for us, and so things could also be hosted on the cloud, but then the latency issues come in as well. So if we are really wanting to come about dramatic change, and I do think Africa will be the leaders in this because we're doing it out of necessity. We're going to have to get those models much smaller, which means they should be able to run on CPU or something similar.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually had the same issue, and we also were fortunate to be supported by big tech. But then you can burn through cloud credits really quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So the first way we solved that was we got some GPUs donated by HP and NVIDIA, a small amount that we had in our office. Then we needed more, so I had to travel to the UK and the US and hand carry some in my suitcase. That was one way of solving the problem, and then we went back.
Did you have a stable electricity supply for them when you got
We
back?
had to install UPS, like you should see. Our office is very innovative, so we had to install UPS as another source of power. And when there is foundation model training, there's a little sign, do not touch. So we've had to be creative, and I think the constraints that we were facing is actually the reason why we thought, okay, why don't we try to build a business around that, because everybody else is facing the same problem, and that's why that's how the idea of like those micro-compute nodes actually came. Yeah. And I totally agree, you don't actually need a GPU to train every AI models, right? It's a narrative that's still being pushed by the US, certain players in Europe and in Asia, that you need to build super large-scale supercomputers, and the only way to do AI is to build those big general-purpose models. Actually, no. It always goes back to what's the problem you're trying to solve? You know, what's the minimum viable data sets that you can put your hands on that's super high quality, super optimized to solving that problem, and do you then actually need a GPU to train? There is so much efficiency that can be gained at every single layers, like even the compute. Can you have an orchestrator that can allow you to really right-size the job or the compute based on the job that you're trying to run? So if you have a system with a CPU and a GPU, can you have an orchestrator that tells you, okay, you want to train a small model, then it's going to pick automatically the CPU to run that task, or if it's a little bit larger, it's going to pick the GPU, but then you don't overfit or underfit, and then you really can optimize the system at every single layers. So I think we need to go back to first principles when we think about models, training, GPUs, compute, and kind of think about, yeah, the problem you're trying to solve, the data sets that you have, and then optimize at every single layers as much as you can. And then we'll get into a world where you don't actually need hundreds of billions to build AI systems. Yeah. You can actually do it on smaller platforms, and it will beat those large models at accuracy because it's built for that specific purpose.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that makes me think of, I think there's growing interest as well in Edge AI. We call it Edge AI at GSMA. And we were talking about this very briefly earlier, but yeah, and small AI, which is about building smaller models in many cases that can be run on devices, mobile devices, including in low connectivity environments. And I think there is a lot of potential there for highly specialized use cases, and not necessarily, as you're saying, relying on these huge models with billions of parameters. Turning to collaboration, partnerships, I think you've all mentioned to some extent working with different actors in the ecosystem. Pelani, from your perspective, working in different African countries, do you think every country should try and build its own infrastructure, AI infrastructure, or is regional collaboration the main realistic way forward?
Well, thank you for that. But I think is what the regulation demands. I mean, if we have cross-border type of regulations that allow us to collaborate, then it makes sense that we don't need to go sovereign state to say this is for Rwanda, this is for South Africa. But at the end of the day, this infrastructure, the economies of scale, right? I mean, an investment in one particular country can be leveraged by another country. I mean, in Southern Africa, we've got what's called the SADC bloc. The SADC bloc, for example, if we learn from what we're doing with tourism, they're trying to getting rid of all the visa entries that are required for one person to travel to another country, right? And if that's the case, can we not innovate around that policy level to say, what can we do with data around these particular trade partners, you know what I mean, without actually needing it to put all the infrastructure in there. So much as I would like to see each and every IBM computer in the country and sell more, that's not the idea. I think we need to solve the problem for what it is. So that's from a regulator point of view. But again, if people still need GPUs, there are cloud solution providers. We bought a company, Red Hat, where basically we're finding that some people still need GPUs, and what we're doing is, instead of lifting that data from the country, we are able to connect from a cloud source. It doesn't matter. It can be AWS, Microsoft, IBM Cloud, because IBM, we follow an open architecture, hybrid cloud. We're able to connect to your data on-prem and be able to do inferencing there on your data on-prem without actually lifting it from the cloud. So that technology exists.
Yeah.
So we might not necessarily have to go all out putting the hardware in place. There are all these solutions that are out there. We just need to test them at how scalable they are to achieve what we want to achieve. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate and Pelonomi, question for you. I think, Kate, you mentioned working with NVIDIA and HP. So in many cases, working or partnering with big tech players or bigger players can bring a lot of resources, can bring investment, but at the same time, it can create dependency. So how do you ensure that African innovators do set the terms for these partnerships and collaborations?
Okay, fine, I'll go first. Yeah, it is an incredible tension.
Yeah.
I mean, also, we often see these big tech players as threats in many ways. And not always having our best interests at heart, but there really are people inside those companies who want to try to do the right thing. And I think the things that I've seen in the ecosystem which have been most concerning for me is the non-desire to collaborate with local players who are developing solutions themselves. A lot of what I've seen, for example, is funding coming in from these institutions purely to create data sets. And to me, that is a very extractive relationship, which means that economic value is barred from continually creating value in the African context. And it's very exploitative. Like when you were mentioning earlier about the drive for people to be creating all of this data, I think it's fantastic. And we do need it in the open domain for people to build, but there does need to be protections in place to ensure that the people building, who ultimately benefit from those languages, from those voices, from that culture, from that heritage, also stand to benefit in the long term with the crazy amounts of revenue potential that those models can create. So that has been one of the major things and points of tension for me, is those players coming in, sponsoring data, which we all need, but then being in a better position than local players to capitalize on that data. And then on the other side of that, I mean, we went to one of the players and we were like, hey, our translation is better than yours for these languages. Just let us plug in to what you have. we'll serve those languages. And they were like, no,
Oh, wow.
give us the data. So I think globally, and I guess because of the competitive landscape, people are very reluctant to use external partnerships to supplement what they lack, which I understand, but it's not conducive if we want to move as quickly and as well as we want to move. It's very frustrating.
Yeah. And a lot of people are saying like data is the new oil.
Yeah.
It's like everyone, it's very valuable, everyone wants to somehow be involved, and yeah. Kate, do you have any perspective on that as well?
Yeah, we talk about the trillions of dollars of economic value that AI is supposed to generate in Africa. I think 1.6 trillion you said, and yesterday someone said 2.9 or something. But we have to be realistic that this won't happen unless we start owning and building our own infrastructure.
Correct.
And encouraging local innovators. So yeah, the tension is there, but I think it's all about finding the balance. How can you take what is best being built over there to kind of use it to build your own ecosystem? So for us, if we get compute from NVIDIA or from AMD, then building a regional node that we can operate and provide access to that compute to local developers for free, let's do it, right? So we don't get them to be dependent on large cloud service providers who are literally here to just take our data. It's the last frontier, right? They have the biggest models in the world. They have all the data on the internet. The only place that is not there is actually Africa. So they're very interested right now in coming in the continent and kind of perpetuating those extractive models. But one of the things that I think they're highly underestimating is that one constraint is our superpower, and local context is also our superpower.
Yeah.
I was talking to an MIT professor last week who was telling me that they did a research study where they compared global solutions with local innovation, specifically in the context of Africa. I think the research was on climate resilience, and every time they were comparing a local innovation with a global innovation, the local innovation was beating the global innovation by far, thanks to the local context. So we have to remember that us as innovators, we have a huge head start, and we have a huge opportunity to actually build something that's more useful than any of the things that big tech companies will build. But I also would like to put it back on like the businesses and the governments and encourage everybody to start buying local. You know, it's very easy to see fancy big tech companies coming and you're like, oh, I want to be associated with them, with the Google, with the Amazons of the world. But you have to ask yourself, is that technology actually built reflecting our context? Or can you find a local innovator that will build it 10 times better because they understand and they've lived through the experiences that their communities and their country face? And I think it's going to require a mindset shift from every single angle. And that's the only way we will truly be able to build the future that we're all dreaming of, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much for this. I guess to wrap up before opening the floor to questions. One, last question to all of you really, but it's about, looking ahead in the next couple of years. What would, a thriving AI ecosystem look like, and what is maybe one change or one investment that is needed from your perspective to reach that? Maybe Pelani, Pelonomi, Kate.
Well, ladies first.
Now you look prepared.
I mean, considering what I've seen in the past 18 months, that's not an easy question. It's like trying to find that silver bullet to solve the AI issue. To the fact that we don't have enough data to understand what the problem we're trying to solve is, it's another area where basically I think for me is, if I'm going to build a strategy, I'll start looking at the value chain of that strategy. Where is Africa sitting? So so much as we cannot manufacture our own processors and GPUs and everything else, but perhaps we can do something so that we can make AI affordable and more inclusive to Africans. Because, I mean, if you are going to to cost a model or your business services out of GPUs, most likely people won't afford it. I just looked at some of the stats over there. I mean, if you look at the GDP compared of GPU for Africa and Germany, I mean, it's like 75% of some of one African countries was like, that's how much you need to invest in, right? So I would say that we need to look at the value chain. Where do we start as Africa, realistically, and build something that is more inclusive, AI that is more inclusive, that will solve African problems. That's where I'll start. But beyond that, to be honest with you, it's a bit too early, because this generative AI has morphed into agentic AI, and now people are talking about general AI that will be seen probably in the next decade or so, but I don't believe so. So these are all the complexities that are coming through. Yeah. But in short, I'll look at the value chain and where we start as Africa in the value chain for that strategy. Yeah.
I think it's complex because there's so many layers across the ecosystem, not just the innovators, but also government, policymakers, private sector. But if I can talk about what I hope will happen, is that we will start seeing, if we get this right as an ecosystem and as a continent, I truly believe that we will start seeing African intelligence being exported out. Yeah. So solutions like yours, like ours, starting being used in other emerging economies, you know. Emerging economies who have similar challenges and similar constraints as we have. And Africa would have been able to lead that journey and kind of show them how it can be done. There is a misconception that, you know, there's not much AI innovation happening in Africa. It's been happening for so long. It's just that we just have to kind of deconstruct and reconstruct how we think about AI innovation. Yep. And it's not just large language models, it's everything that solves a problem and that is used, solving a problem in the right way and in an efficient way. And I think it's an opportunity for us to lead on that side. There's just so many movements today, like frugal AI, like you mentioned, you know, edge AI and such. We've been leading in that for a very long time. I mean, Kenya and Nigeria were two of the three largest chapters for TinyML 7 years ago, and they still have a very thriving community on the ground. So we need to find a way to kind of surface that innovation and make sure we encourage it to grow and create the kind of like economic value that we aspire to create in our countries.
Yeah,
I think there is a misconception of seeing Africa as like users of technology, but not necessarily as the ones actually innovating and leading, and yet there is so much happening underground as you're saying. Pelonomi?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely identify with what Kate's saying there. I think going forward, people will be looking to Africa for solutions that are more sustainable for more people. And Africa will be providing those solutions to other parts of the world, including the West. And I suppose, I mean, from my perspective, from the language space, what we've dreamt about is language not being a barrier to access and entry into the digital economy. So for me, that's what I would love to see, that there's a seamless integration of cross-lingual communication such that people don't have to assimilate to a different language or a different culture in order to access opportunity. That's from an education perspective, from a business perspective, that people are able to arrive as they are with the smarts that they have to solve the problems that they need to without having to learn a new language first. That's what I'm excited about. And the change I think I would like to see, and it's kind of tying what you were saying, Pelani, earlier about collaboration, where the amount of capital that is coming into the continent is significantly less than the amount of capital that's going into other parts of the world. And fundamentally what that requires is that when we distribute our collaboration efforts, we're also making sure that we're capitalizing on that capital coming in as much as possible. So Kate, when you're talking about open sourcing those models, we did a similar thing with an LLM called Nkuba. The motivation was like, okay, it's there, people can build on top of it, and it means they don't have the capital to build, they don't need the capital to build the foundational because we're going to share the money that's available. So that's what I would change, is to make sure that we're strengthening those collaboration levers in a distributed way so that we don't all need the same amount of capital to build something. We're grouping resources together for more of a collective good. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we have time for a few questions from the audience. We have some mics around the room, I think. So yeah, please feel free to raise your hand. You can see one over there. Yeah, maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions.
Good afternoon. Am I being heard? You can hear me? Okay, so thank you so much. That was a really, really beautiful discussion. My question goes out to Kate. Building a data infrastructure is the next big thing in Africa, but how are you navigating it with the data privacy that is ongoing and the I can't call it backward mindset, but the kind of mindset that we hold with the different people that we have in Africa. So how are you navigating building the data infrastructure with data privacy? Yeah.
So that's a great question, thank you. So when it comes to data privacy, I think people now englobe a couple of contexts underneath. So there's data sovereignty, being able to have agency over your data and owning your own data. There is data residency, making sure that the critical data that you have in your country stays in your country, doesn't get exported out. And the way we've been thinking about this kind of goes back to what you were saying around infrastructure. Yes, not all African countries have the power that's needed, the connectivity that is needed, and the money that's needed to be able to build large-scale data centers. But every single country should be allowed to have agency over their own data, especially over citizens' data. And that's why when we looked at, deploying micro data centers and microcompute that it is affordable and can be powered by renewable, is like, okay, what is the minimum viable data from a data sovereignty standpoint that a country needs to be able to have ownership of, and then how much compute is actually needed. And then a small country will not need the same size as a bigger country. Yeah. But can you support countries to have that small amount of compute, at least to guarantee some level of data sovereignty? And then the rest can continue going to the cloud. But at least we allow countries to be able to be owners of their own data. And I think for me, that's the biggest challenge that we've tried to solve with that approach. So it was actually to respond to those questions of data sovereignty and to be able to make sure that, if you're going to create that value, it actually has to happen within those borders. So that's the idea around closing that compute gap. And it's not about deploying large-scale infrastructure. It's really about what is the minimum to make sure that we can, keep that value in our country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Augustine, and I'm the founder of Momentum. I'm the chair for IEEE Rwanda. My question is basically on the growth. When we are talking about collaboration for growth, are we talking about whose growth? Are we talking about the growth of the founders? Are we talking about the growth of the end users or the development of the receivers? So who is growing? And if we are going to grow together, how? So which is the approach for us to grow together? Another question is like, in the AI journey that we are in, how are we looking at the customers? Are we looking at them as people who understand what we understand as developers? Or we are thinking them as people who can be taken hand by hand so that they cope with what we understand? Because the founder may understand the technicality of the things, but when it comes to the customers, they don't even have the idea of what you're talking about. But those are your customers. So what are you doing to make sure you go with them hand in hand? Thank you.
Does anyone want to?
Okay, I can go.
I don't know who that question was directed to.
To everyone, I guess.
Was it?
Like, to everyone?
Yeah, I think
Anyone.
so.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead first?
I mean, it's probably a matter of an opinion, so I would like to hear your opinion as well.
Look, there are several players. You mentioned about growth. The one who's consuming, the one who's funding as well, and the one who's basically offering the services. Did I get that correct? Yeah? All right. So, look, if you look at it, let me give you an analogy of a tree. A tree doesn't grow on its stem alone. It grows on its leaves, on its branches, and even the fruits come out, right? That's how growth naturally occurs. It doesn't occur in silo. So anything that is happening in silos is probably a sign of greed somewhere. So in this particular case, if you have got a business model as a business, I'm talking now from an enterprise point of view, that you've got a business model, you need to solve a specific social problem in the society. Most likely, if you are going to grow because of what value you're showing that particular end person, so that is more like a high affinity growth. The funders who are expecting some form of return, it depends on the funding. There are some funders who are basically fund out of goodwill. They don't expect money back. There are some funders who expect money back. But at the end of the day, those are all informed out of the business model and regulated by the government to make sure that whatever you do is responsible AI as you're growing. Yeah? So that's how I would see it from my perspective. Yeah. So growth is for everyone. You can never leave anyone behind. Otherwise, it's not inclusive.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, any technology to be truly useful, it has to be invisible. So we all have to contribute to really lowering the barrier to entry to that technology and making sure that, we don't just build something for people who understand how to build technology, but we also build something for the global majority or the masses, for them to have access to more services and be able to, use those platforms. So it has to come from every angle in the ecosystem, and growth won't happen for just one strand. It has to happen for the entirety of it at the same time.
Great. I think, let's take one final question, and then we'll wrap up.
Hello, my name is Mohammed. I'm a software engineer at Base Consulting. My question is, how do you see young people, talented young people that are graduating from universities and other educational institutions directly contributing to African intelligence through the use of AI? So you have mentioned that data is already there, and it might be in different forms. So are they there to translate this data? Can they contribute by translating this data to a digital form? Do they need to create new data? Do they need to perform new research? And what will be your, your word of advice to them so that they can contribute to this big picture of intelligence by African for Africa?
Don't be scared to start. Whatever your background is, there is a role to play. So, whether you're technical or not, there is space for everyone. So maybe find some community sources in your country, in your city, congregate, build, solve hackathons, try things out, reach out to people, go to some hubs, because we need you. That's the honest truth.
Lelapa, the word Lelapa means home, and it's because we were trying to create a home for African talent, because we were wanting to address this brain drain issue. So my word of advice is the grass isn't greener on the other side. Sometimes it's just covered in manure,
Yeah.
Don't forget where you come from. The best way to be fulfilled in your work is to work on something you care about, and most of the time that's working on problems that help your community and the people that you love. So stay here.
Yeah, and just to add to what my colleagues have mentioned, I saw earlier on, they said, I think 60% of our population at the median level is 19 years old in Africa. So, I mean, look, if you decide not to participate today, then probably you're going to grow old like some of us who are not digital native, AI natives. We grew up, we were born in the AI winter, right? So you want to differentiate yourselves from what is native to you. So essentially, participate in it. And there are so many programs, so many initiatives that you've got. At GSMA, there are so many learning and skills initiatives. In IBM, we have got IBM Skills Build that it's open AI, you can learn AI, you get a certificate. There are so many companies, startups that are coming up, trying to find new mindsets to help with the data science projects. Get involved. And there are all these goodwill projects that are really coming through in Africa. Smart Africa also is doing some of that, yeah. So there's much, I think for me, there's much better opportunity for you to participate now than to sit back. That's what I think.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for this discussion. Really good to hear your perspective, insights, and yeah, bridging the data compute gap. So yeah, let's give a round of applause for the panelists. And yeah, we'll have some other sessions as well from Mobile for Development later this afternoon and tomorrow morning. So yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of your time in MWC Kigali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, shit. Vai, anch'io.